Imagine having your dream job just to get pushed out over your personal, very deeply held beliefs. That's what happened to Sage Steele. You're going to want to see this amazing interview with this amazing lady. A little backstory. Sage Steele followed me out of the blue probably 3 or 4 years ago. I think I already followed you on Twitter, and I sent you a DM. And I said, hey, Sage Steele, love you. Love watching your stuff. Come on the show. And I think I can say so now because we're well past that. Your answer was, I'd love to, but I can't in the current climate. It was like right when things were starting to happen. So for those who don't know, she was a huge star on ESPN. I think will be a bigger star now away from ESPN. And you were there at a time when ESPN went from a sports network to we're going to be woke and we're going to take a stand. I mean, did I characterize it right, do you think?
Yeah, I think it was kind of gradual. But number one, yes, I remember saying that to you. Number one, being honored that you had reached out to me because I had followed you and really loved your courage and
Thank you.
just affording people like me, it's like, okay, you can do this, you can say this, you can be yourself, even though I couldn't at the time, right?
Right.
And I understood that, by the way. I was never trying to make it stink about anything.
Right.
It's just all of a sudden and it really, I think, went kind of crazy when Donald Trump won the election in 2016.
Yes.
And I said this to someone recently on the air, and I couldn't believe watching from my couch that election night in 2016, my bosses, like executives, big time leaders at the network, tweeting their disdain for Trump having just won and how mortified they were.
Right.
It's like, these are my bosses and we're journalists. I mean, we're journalists, right? What is happening? And so at that point, it's like, okay, this is scary. Sounds dramatic, but it's just, there was so much happening, and it was okay to rip on Trump, but it wasn't okay to support him. And it was immediate. And when you are an employee and your bosses up here who make decisions on your well-being and your job and your salary are tweeting that, you better be quiet. And that's where it really got ugly in my mind. And it makes me sad because I have to tell you, that was my dream job, Joe. Like, since I was 11 years old, I announced that I was going to be a sportscaster. And then high school, I was like, ESPN's the place.
Yeah.
And I did it. And I did it at the highest level for a long time. And I'm so sad. And I also have zero regrets. And I would do it all again in every single way. I literally loved my job to the very last day I was on the air. I was able to overlook the crap
Isn't that
and
something?
focus on my job.
Well, I love that you told me when it was. I didn't know that it was actually like election day where it went like, holy crap. Because again, inside the building, I worked in newsrooms for many years. I was a journalist many years, television news anchor, the whole thing. And there were people that were completely not aligned with me politically, but it didn't matter. When I hit the air, the 6 and 11 o'clock anchor in Albany, New York, I got an email from a guy the first night. He said, great, another liberal on the air. I mean, so I thought to myself, man, I must be doing the job pretty well. This idiot thinks I'm a liberal. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that was the job though, right? Sage, you never showed who you were outside of the realm of this is what I do. I'm delivering information. I'm doing it the best I can. And if I do it well enough, I can make some money. I mean, it really wasn't ever about who you were politically, but then all of a sudden on that day it was.
I never, and I made a conscious decision from the very beginning, a decision that no one had to tell me to make. It's just obvious. As a journalist, your opinion does not matter. You do interviews, you do highlights, everything is based on facts, or you're asking questions of people who are experts or athletes
Yes.
who've been through it, etc. And I was proud of that. Like, maybe that's old school journalism, but that's what I was supposed to be doing. When things began to change, that's certainly when it was a little disheartening, disturbing. And, I'm not alone as the only conservative at that network. I might be the only one who's really spoken up in the last several years, but there were a handful, and we would have these private conversations, these like, secret text chains, because it's like, don't tell anyone. We were
Wow.
like in the closet. And I hear from them still every once in a while. And especially like with this transgender sports issue, there's so many people at ESPN who don't agree with what's going on, even people on the left. But they're all afraid to say something. That's a whole other topic that kind of makes me crazy.
Right.
But in general, I wasn't alone. I was just the only one that began to speak up. And that was only because I got pushed. It was never my plan. I was a pleaser growing up. I'm like the goody two shoes, like make sure everybody likes me, tiptoe around, total pleaser disease. So it's a far jump to see where I am right now
Yeah.
versus then as a person, much less career wise, because I had to change. I had a decision to make, to stay quiet and feel like part of my soul was being just broken because everybody else was allowed to be themselves because they
Right.
fit the narrative. And it was obviously a huge decision to say, I'm not going to be quiet anymore.
Sage Steele, she's got the Sage Steele show now. Go to sagesteele.com, and it's Steele is her last name. First name Sage. Just an honor and pleasure to have you on. Just a little background on me, not that you asked, but I loved Sports Center. I loved Keith Olbermann and Dan Patrick doing the big show. I loved the stupid commercials with people saying we're just men wearing makeup, like denigrating themselves, which was self-deprecating humor is amazing. Their irreverence got me in trouble once. I was a news anchor in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I believe at the end of the newscast one day I rolled up my script and I threw it at the camera. My general manager called me and he said, "This isn't Sports Center. Knock it off." So I mean, people loved what your network was bringing. People loved when you showed up and go, "Oh wow, we really like what Sage Steele is bringing." Because as you said, it's not about opinion; it was about entertaining me. ESPN is Entertainment Sports Network. It's about entertaining me, keeping my eyeballs there, making me think that I must see this show that Sage is hosting or that Keith or Dan or fill in the blank is hosting. But then something happened in 2016 when Colin Kaepernick hit a knee. And first of all, he was sitting down first for the national anthem. Nobody reports this because he got benched. So he was mad. He's a little baby. And then he started kneeling for the national anthem. And then suddenly ESPN decided not only is he kneeling, but we have to support his kneeling. For me, that's when it changed. And you were there at the time. Did you feel that sea change in the newsroom, if you will, at ESPN when they said we had to support this guy?
It all kind of just feels jumbled together, I think, that entire time. I remember tweeting about it, and that was the first time I got in trouble.
What did you say in that tweet? 'Cause I think that's when we connected.
Maybe it was, listen, I had just come from Arlington National Cemetery, where I had the pleasure of hosting Sports Center at Arlington National Cemetery on Veterans Day 2016, I guess it was.
Right.
So yeah, it was like a week after the election, right?
Yes.
And, I was able to do my dream job from a place that meant so much to me as a patriot, as an American, as an Army brat. My dad's a retired Army colonel, West Point graduate. Like, I grew up in that world. And by the way, my grandfather, a World War II veteran, Buffalo soldier, was buried 200 yards behind me at Arlington National Cemetery when I was live doing my dream job. He would have been so proud.
Yes.
My dad came on the show with me that day. And so I remember then the next day, I think it was, seeing Colin Kaepernick with the knee and many other athletes. Actually, I think it was Mike Evans, the awesome Buccaneers receiver, who I had ended up actually tweeting about because I retweeted something ESPN had posted, which was about him at his locker after that first Sunday's game after Trump won.
Right.
And he was mad and he had taken a knee because Trump won. And then I found out that he hadn't even voted. I'm like, you can't bitch and moan about stuff if you're not even going to vote.
Right.
And so I posted a picture of me, of a person that I had photographed at Arlington National Cemetery on his knee at a gravestone of his son. I'm like, this is what it's about, you guys. I don't remember my exact words, but I remember being heartbroken that in that case, I think uneducated athletes had used that gesture when so many people have died for it. Now, so many would say, and I've been told this a million times, well, that's what they died for, Sage. Their right to take a knee, their right to say what they want and whatever. And that's absolutely true. I just think there's a lot of hypocrisy there when you're so upset over who just won the presidency, but you didn't even take the time to vote, which is what so many people died for, right?
Yes.
And that's when it really kind of started to go south for me in hindsight. I remember getting crushed for it and being like, oh my gosh. And I remember being scared to death. And then eventually it dies down. And then you start to speak up a little. And I'll be quiet after this. I just couldn't get over how all of my peers were allowed to say anything and everything. Anti-Trump, everything woke. Was woke a word then? I don't know that it was. But
you're starting to show up, yeah.
It was. And it was so shocking to see the double standard. And that's when I kept saying, wait a minute. I think we all have a voice, or nobody as journalists. What's our job? And I was in the minority, apparently, with that thought process.
It's Sage Steele, host of the Sage Steele Show. Go to sagesteele.com and taking everything that she does, go follow her everywhere as well. A couple of things. Yes, they fought and died for their right to peacefully protest, not in uniform at work. In fact, the Supreme Court said the employer can tell you, we're going to restrict your First Amendment right. You need to have your hair here. You can't have a mustache past here. You have to make sure you wear this hat and those shoes. You can tell somebody who's in uniform for your company, you can't take a knee during the national anthem. Go wait in the locker room if you want. But flopping around on the sideline doesn't make any sense. You're representing us, the Cowboys, or us, the Jets, or whomever. So I stopped watching sports, period. I was a big-time Miami Dolphins fan. I live in San Antonio. I'm a Spurs fan. I'm a Yankees fan. I mean, I was a guy who took in everything that you did on ESPN and everything that I could possibly get in about sports. And I stopped cold because of the flopping around and then supporting Che Guevara and supporting Fidel Castro, which is what Kaepernick did like an idiot.
Yeah.
But I got in an argument on Twitter with Stan Verrett from ESPN.
Yeah.
Stan Verrett went on the air and he said, my grandfather fought in World War II or something like that, or our grandparents couldn't fight in World War II. But long story short, he was trying to make it personalized to him. I support Colin Kaepernick because of my ancestry or my heritage. And I wrote back and said, Stan, your job is to just tell me what happened in the sports. You know, if you want to do this, go and find a microphone outside the building and then go protest at City Hall. What are you doing? Why do you want me not to watch you? And he's very snide and very stupid in his remarks to me. But at the end of the day, it pushed a guy like me away that I think ESPN needs. Don't they need my eyeballs? Don't they need my support for their sponsors?
I've said that from day one. I had conversations with with bosses about this topic and saying, what are we doing? I've said this 100 times over the last couple of years. Michael Jordan said it, Republicans buy sneakers too. And he was so right. And it's not just in television or broadcasting or journalism. It's any business, any industry. Don't you want everybody to buy your products, to watch your programming? Why would you pick and choose? This is a capitalist society. God bless America. It's just stupid business practice to intentionally be divisive. Now, I think there's a difference between going on the air and giving your opinion, which it sounds like Stan did that day. And certainly doing it on your social media. I made sure of a couple of different things, but like on Twitter, I wasn't Sage Steele ESPN. A lot of people put ESPN behind it or NBC, whatever it is. And I just kept it Sage Steele. Of course, in the bio, it described that I worked for ESPN, but I wanted to make sure and be respectful that what I was saying on social media wasn't representative of my company. I could have that personal opinion there, but on the air, I'm going to keep it straight because that is my job.
Exactly right.
And I took pride in that. But listen, I think the real turning point then was 2020 and the pandemic, which coincided with George Floyd. And that was the beginning of the end. And then you had leadership and management, I think, throughout corporate America, big business, small business, whatever it might be, who were then afraid to tell their employees, listen, stop. Let's just not go there, because then they'd be called a racist or any ism, right? Like fill in the blank at this point. So to me, that's when it really turned, because Jimmy Pitaro came in, I think in 2017, taking over as president at ESPN, and he believed the same thing about keeping it separate. And I loved him. John Skipper was the prior president. He didn't mind the divisiveness. He's more like Iger. Like, that's okay. I believe, I'm a like bleeding heart liberal, like left wing, and that's what we're going to do. Jimmy wasn't like that, and really laid down the law with all of us, like keep it separate, keep it out, keep it clean. We want everybody to watch,
and we want to make money. We'd like to make some money. Yeah, I mean, if you don't make money, well, at what point did they decide? Do you think? And it's Sage Steele. You've got me a million things going on in my brain. I don't mean to interrupt, but as I'm watching ESPN ruin itself and push people like you away that drew me to watch, I don't understand what the bottom line is for them. Is the bottom line, I don't care how much money we lose as long as we fit into this DEI globalist thing? I mean, what can the mentality possibly be watching them just leak money?
I don't know. Yeah. And especially because, if anything, don't you want diverse opinions, diverse people, diverse minds on your programming? Even if we're not saying it on the air, if we represent that, then that shows that you are truly accepting and tolerant of everybody. Isn't that DEI? So I don't know, but I also think it's bigger than ESPN. Who owns us? I say us. Who owns them? Who owns ESPN? It's Disney.
Right, Disney does. Disney does, and I think that Disney is owned by the WEF, to be honest with you, but go ahead.
That's my point, is that it's just, I don't think I know that many of the decision makers in Bristol, Connecticut, did not agree with this, but felt like their hands were tied, and felt like, that day, I mean, all the George Floyd stuff. And I mean, when we had, our journalists on the air crying, they were in the NBA bubble, crying over what was going on. And then Breonna Taylor, and you know what? Fine, just get the facts straight. Like, nobody even had the facts straight. And I think that was one of the tough times, is when you had LeBron James tweeting about some of these cases, and whatever that case was in Cincinnati, I think, with the police officer, and then they tweet about it without knowing the facts.
It,
And
it
then
was
when
it
the
was
facts revealed,
Cleveland. It was actually Cleveland.
Cleveland.
It's where LeBron is from, for God's sakes, and he got it
Out
wrong.
Akron,
Yeah. Right. Well, right. But it was
right outside.
Yeah. And by the way, we're being heard in Akron and Cleveland right now. But having said that, this cop saved a life, and he saved the life of a black person. Yet LeBron James basically doxed him and said,
And
"You're
that
next."
was so shocking to me. And I was like, wait a minute, do you know the facts? Because I like LeBron. Like, do you know the facts? And then the problem is, when they do learn the facts, there's just silence. There's no going back and owning it, because I think that would endear him and anyone. I mean, that happens all the time. It happens with me as a parent. Like, I screw up, believe it or not, a lot with 3 kids. My youngest just turned 18 on Saturday, 18, 20, and 22. And I'm doing this, the dads are here in town, but I'm a single mom, and I'm the sole breadwinner, and it's all kind of on me. And it's like, I screw up a lot, and I struggle, and I question myself every day, but I try to own it. I don't always, so I try to own it. And when I do, it's amazing what happens with the conversation.
Yes.
Right. Especially 3-on-1. Sometimes they come at me. Right. But like, there's no difference between that at home, with us owning our mistakes or misunderstandings, and at a company with leadership. That's one of the things that throughout my career, not just at ESPN, I've had so few good leaders. It's one thing to have a title. It's another thing to actually know how to lead.
Yeah.
And so few people do. And so few people have to. And I think that's the saddest thing, because with true leadership, ESPN could have absolutely avoided the mess that now has them hemorrhaging. And I'm going to say, the majority of people there are incredible and so talented. What I did on that show with my teammates every single day, 2 live hours, international TV, walking and talking, highlights, interviews, statistics, breaking news. We wrote all of our own stuff. No one's writing our stuff for us. Like, it is a heavy lift, and it is a true team. And I love my last 3 years there on the Noon Eastern Sports Center. I loved it. Like, just remind people of why we're there. And then the greatness of that network would have continued. Listen, I think they'll always be okay in some ways, because it's all about live programming. And that's what they have. They have live programming.
Yes.
They have the games. They have championships. They have college football. They paying billions of dollars for it. NBA, the 2 titles we crown on our air are NBA and college football, and now WNBA as well, women's college hoops. So long as you have that, I hear it all the time. You see it on social media. Like, I hate ESPN. I hate it. But I'm going to watch this game, but then I'm going to turn it off.
Yeah.
So that's what saves them. And I really hope and pray that it is salvageable, because there's too many good people who work there who have my mindset, but just unfortunately have a true fear to be able to say it. And I understand that fear, Joe. I really do.
Right.
I don't agree with it all the time, because at some point it's kind of like, if you don't vote, then shut up, right? Well, if you don't speak up with some of these things, especially the transgender sports issue right now, that's so black and white, then I feel like we kind of are complicit with these things if we remain silent out of fear. Again, I had all the reason in the world to be fearful, being the sole supporter of these 3 awesome kids, right? And my career that I'd worked so hard for, like blood, sweat, tears, and I loved it. I mean that. I knew I was taking risks to speak up. But I knew that I was also encouraging my kids to do the same at their junior high or high school.
Right.
So how can I be a hypocrite and go quiet just when it gets a little scary?
And outside of your house, you've been empowering people for a long time now. People say if Sage Steele will do it and give up an opportunity at her favorite place and have fear about what the future looks like, if she'll do it, I can do it. You know, it's crazy, and it really bothers me that I live this way, because again, I love sports. I was a baseball player growing up. I can't tell you the starting pitchers on the Yankees. I don't know who the starting 5 are on my Spurs. I have no idea who the quarterback is for the Miami Dolphins right now. And I hate that. But I literally did what I said I would do. I stopped watching it. I'm not going to give
Wow.
them my eyeballs. And it bothers me because I used to play the national anthem at the Spurs games. I played at the Western Conference Championship against the Lakers when Kobe was still playing. I played my
Wow.
saxophone and played the national anthem. And I'm now disconnected from them because the coach decided he would call Donald Trump a misogynist and an Islamophobic and a this and a that. And I went, dude, I cannot
I
be with you.
remember that.
Right. He
Yes.
said all these things. And Sage, I was playing 3 or 4 times a year in front of 20,000, the national anthem at these games, at some of the biggest games on TNT everywhere. And I decided to give that up, and it hurt because I loved
Did you have
it.
a conversation with him? Did you ever talk to
I
Pop
can't.
about
I can't. You can't get to him. He was on my show once 15 years ago to talk about wine. It was when the NBA was doing a lockout. He couldn't talk about the NBA. And he was talking about wine and speaking Russian. It was very interesting. But I was very close to the player personnel guy. I was very close to Becky Hammond. I was very close to I had the Spurs on. I gave Bruce Bowen his first shot on radio. Now he's out there broadcasting everywhere. So I was in, like I was really in, and now I'm persona non grata because I dared say, well, wait a second, Pop. If you can do that, and you can have lunch with Bill Clinton and these other high-level Democrats and attack the president of the United States, why can't I criticize you for doing it? That's what I did. That was my mistake. I went on my show, which is based in San Antonio, 170 stations outside now, and they heard me, and they called the station. Why would he say that? I was just simply responding to what he said about Trump.
Yeah.
And you know what? I thought long and hard, and if I could go back and do it again, I'd probably do it again, but a little bit differently so as not to completely kill the relationship. But at what point did you decide, I have to now do this? Because I know you held your tongue for a long time, because I did. That's what we do, because we're doing what we love, Sage. So what was it that you said, I'm going to risk them suspending me? This is worth it.
I got suspended for something I didn't know I was doing wrong. I wasn't trying.
How is that possible?
I was holding back. And the suspension came from when I went on Jay Cutler's podcast on an off day, on a non-ESPN platform, most importantly, to talk about whatever it was he wanted to talk about. He started a new podcast. His publicist, I knew his publicist. He's like, hey, will you come on? We're looking for a woman. And I was like, sure, I'll come on. I never met Jay, but I'd love to. Why not?
The former Bears quarterback, Jay Cutler?
Former Bears quarterback, okay. Yeah. And so I'd obviously done, a lot of highlights about him through the years, et cetera. And I was like, absolutely. And he did a really good job. And his research staff, they all came up with topics that they knew I was passionate and strong about, I think, and vocal. And it ended up being women in sports. It ended up being the race issue and being biracial and why it's important to me to say biracial. And as a woman with a Black father, a white mother,
yeah.
I'm so proud of all of me. And that apparently is controversial. And also the vaccine mandate, which is different from just the vaccine, right?
Right.
And but I was very respectful with all of it. I thought I think it depends on the timing, because depending on when you talk to them, they were upset more over the vax comment, and then it was actually the women comment, and then it was the Obama comment, and it just depended on which way the world was turning that day, where the sun was shining. It just kept changing. But I got pulled off the air immediately for 14, 15 days, and forced to publicly apologize. And listen, I held back with my vax comments because I had literally just come from getting the shot, the mandated shot. I was this close to walking away and taking a chance in myself and having them fire me because I felt so uncomfortable with something that was so new that had become so political immediately. If it was Trump pushing it, then it was evil. If it was Biden, then it was Europe. You want to kill babies and old people.
Biden and Harris are both on tape saying, I'm not going to take it because it's his vaccine. And then they pushed it on all of us. Very strange.
So it just, when that starts happening, and then I started to hear about, all the hospitals getting $40,000 per patient if you say it's a COVID death, even if it's a car accident or even if it's cancer or something. When you dug it, not very deep, just a tiny bit, you're like, wait a minute. So I just wasn't comfortable and wanted some more time for some more research to be done. And I had until September 30th, 2021 to be fully vaxxed, which means I had to get the shot, 2 weeks prior?
Right.
And I had just come that day, moments before, from the stupid grocery store around the corner from here in Connecticut, where I got the one shot. I did the one shot thing, and was livid. And I was disgusted with myself for caving. And so I came in hot onto his show.
I'll bet.
And I'll say this, though. When I was getting the shot, I sat in this car and I was in tears. I prayed all morning, just, Lord, guide me Because if you want me to walk away and take this chance and trust you, I will. Or do I just take it and pray that nothing bad happens and, whatever? And I walked in there and I sat down and the nurse looked at me and she's like, and again, I guess she's a nurse, but she's at, the local Stop and Shop grocery store,
Right.
pharmacy. And she said, are you okay? And I was like, no, I'm not. She looked at me. I said, I'm being forced to do this and I think it's wrong. And I'm devastated and I feel like a sellout and I am concerned. And I have 3 kids and it's just me. And she looked at me and she held my hand. Sounds dramatic, but it was just, she grabbed my hand and she goes, this is so wrong and I'm so sorry.
Wow.
And this is a woman who administered the vaccines. And then she gave me a ball in my hand and just to try to keep me and then put it in. And I swear to God, at that moment, something changed in me. And I was angry for being forced to do something to my body. And I was disgusted with myself for caving. And so I drove home and then I was like, crap, I got to get on this podcast. And it was warm out. So I had it sleeveless and I had the Band-Aid on. I didn't remember. People were like, oh, that was a prop. I'm like, no, I literally was a mess.
Everybody always thinks the worst, though. That's a prop.
I know.
Did that on purpose.
So anyway, whatever. He asked me about it and I held back and I said, listen, I think it's sick and scary for any company to mandate a vaccine or anything for someone to do their body. I think it's sick and scary, but Disney's a global company and I'm not surprised. And here I am.
Yeah.
But I complied. And that's something people are like, how did you sue Disney based on First Amendment? I'm like, no, it wasn't. If you read the freaking lawsuit, which by the way, it was public record. If you read it, it wasn't based on the constitutional First Amendment. No, it's the state of Connecticut employment law that allows you to criticize your employer if you are complying with their rules. And that is very rare, apparently, in all the states. But of all places, for Connecticut to have that is pretty shocking, I think. And so that's what the lawsuit was based on. And bigger picture, diversity of thought. That's been my platform for a long time. And in the case of ESPN, again, the double standard. You cannot suspend me, take my assignments away, embarrass me, publicly apologize, shame me, all of the things, and allow my colleagues to go on ESPN airwaves and platforms and talk about their politics and racism and Roe versus Wade on an NBA show and all of the things. And I'm like, just make it consistent. Either we can talk about it or we can't, but you can't pick and choose. I mean, they can because they get away with it. And I just was obviously a major turning point in my life to decide to stand up. And I wasn't going to, but they kept taking assignments away that I'd worked, decades for. And at that point you realize, okay, they're so mad at me that they're going to continue to crush me. I might as well stand up because I know a lot of other people feel silenced too. And that's when I realized it was so much bigger than me. And I had to, and I was so scared, Joe. I was obviously so scared. And I knew I was throwing away my career in some ways, but it was bigger than me. And I'm sad that I had to make the decision, but I wouldn't change a thing. And I loved that job to the very last day I did it, to the day I settled. And no regrets. I'm just sad that it got to this point where any employee would have to make this kind of a decision.
Well, I'm sorry that it got there too. I mean, the global law of informed consent should have taken over when it came to the shot. And as far as you having an opinion, I mean, they had no chance of beating you in this suit because you had all this proof that everybody was doing anything they wanted as long as they were in lockstep. If you had a diverse opinion, you were in trouble. That's not the American way. I'm glad you came out on top of it, and I think you're going to be twice the star that you ever were because although we all knew you from SportsCenter or from ESPN, we didn't know you in a broader sense to those who didn't like sports or those who don't pay attention to that. And now we all will know you. She's on the Bill Maher podcast network now. It's Sage Steele. I don't have a ton of time left, but we should probably do an ancestry test because I'm also Italian and Irish. We might be related. Having said that, Sage, why did they need you to be blacker than you are? What was that deal? We never really talked about what level of black or white are you. You had nothing to do with your parents getting together before you were born. I had nothing to do with my parents getting together. We had no say whatsoever in our racial or ancestral background or makeup. Why do people need you to be something that you're not ready to get in lockstep and just be for them?
I don't know. I will tell you, it's been a thing for me since I was a little girl. We're not quite enough. I had a great conversation. That's actually the next show that I'm dropping on Wednesday on the Sage Steele show. Thank you.
Go check it out. Yeah.
It's with a former NBA star who's also biracial. We talked about so many things besides this, so many awesome, deep, deep things. I love
Right.
him to death. Kind of a bad boy in the league, and it's like, there's always a story. Anyway, a background, people judge. It's like, you don't know what that person's been through. Back off, right? But we talked about that and how it's hard where you're not enough for this side and you're certainly not enough for that side. And what do you do? And why are we judging? And isn't this the definition of diversity? Where my parents, by the way, in October will be married for 53
God bless
years.
them.
I mean, I'm so blessed to have the best role models and the strength that my parents displayed in 1970, 71, coming off the civil rights era. My mom's family disowned her. She was
Oh,
from a
man.
small town in Massachusetts, Catholic small town, and there were no black people. And for my mother to fall in love with a black man, a military black man, and she's going to go around the world, they disowned her. And I look at what it took for them to stand up for their love. Just makes me emotional every time. And I don't know if you've been able to watch this, Joe, but it's been pinned on my X account for, I don't know, 6 or 7 years. And it's a beautiful story that NFL Films did in my family. My brother works in the NFL and they did it on him initially. And then they realized my parents had a really awesome story and did it. And I'll always keep it there because it goes into their story and some of the things that they did for each other, in particular, what my dad did to stand up to her parents that I never knew about until NFL Films did the story. Like, I learned something about my parents, but I just, like, they're my why. I mean, I've experienced nothing compared to them.
Yeah.
And when my parents chose to push through based on love and taught us to love everybody, regardless of race and gender and religion and socioeconomic status, that's just how I am with people. I don't care. I don't give a crap who you vote for.
Right.
I actually don't give a crap who you marry. You want to marry, one of my very best friends, Becky Hammond.
Yes.
She's one of my very best friends. She has a wife. Like, I don't care. I love love and I love kindness. And that's how we were raised. And so that's what I'm trying to stand up for now is people who feel the same way, but are afraid to just say it. And that's what my show is about, is to get to know people's why. And when you hit that wall, like, what do you do? Do you just crumble and fold, or do you stand up? Do you pray? Do you share it with your neighbor? Do you run a marathon? Like, I don't know, but I know that this is why I've tried to, like, for the most part, ignore the Keith Olbermans of the world, which he's impossible to ignore, and he's a waste of time.
I wasn't even going to bring him up because he's so completely unhinged now. It's nuts.
No, he is, but here's the thing, and I worked with him a few times. It was such an honor because, oh my gosh, he was a legend, right? He and Dan Patrick, who's awesome, still to this day, he's wonderful. Like, they were one of the reasons why I wanted to do this. But I look at Keith and people like him where it actually isn't about me.
Yeah.
It's about them, and they've got something in their lives. And I try to remember that when people attack me, and that you've certainly been attacked countless times. It isn't even about you. It's something within them. And I think that's what's allowed me to push through, especially based on what my parents went through. And that's what my show is about. Like, I don't care about your stats as an athlete or, who you're voting for, or all of these things. It's like, what's in here? Because if we go back to that, the humanity part, that's when America comes back.
Well, they don't want us to, Sage. They don't want us to. If they divide us, they can conquer us, they can control us. The fact that you and I are friends and that I don't care what your ancestry is, I mean, I love it, but it doesn't bother me, and mine doesn't bother you. They have a problem with that. They need us to somehow hate each other and be in our own little, sandboxes. It ain't gonna work because we have already said, I love Sage Steele, and she's kind of happy with me. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I've got so many people. Ben Carson is a role model for me. I'm a jazz saxophone player. Every single guy I tried to sound like was black. And I didn't like them because they were black. I liked them because they were great saxophone players.
They're talented.
When will we get to that point? Are we getting close? Because I think there are a lot more people like you and me than we think.
Yeah. You know what? Oh my gosh. Everywhere I've gone lately, people come up and stop me. Airports, on the planes, in bathrooms. I was at the Final Four in Phoenix a week or so ago. So many people. I couldn't go 10 steps without people coming up to me. I actually got emotional and choked up because for a long time, especially after my suspension, etc., when I would go to the grocery store or anywhere, I found that I was looking down. Like, it gets me choked up. I wasn't making eye contact with people because I was so afraid that Twitter and social media stood for what everybody thought, because it's so loud, that vocal minority. And I literally thought that everybody hated me. And I didn't realize how small that group was. But I found myself, and I'm the friendliest person. Ask my kids, like, probably to a fault, like, Mom, shut up, stop talking. Fine. But I'm like, no, but they're really nice. And then I end up hugging the person in the grocery store line. But, like, I found that I had allowed it to change me in that way,
Yeah.
where I was just afraid to make eye contact and afraid that they would hate me. And then I was like, okay, that's on me. That's my fault now for letting them change my spirit
Yes.
and get into like how I was always kind to everybody no matter what, probably extra kind at that time. But like that's what they want, this divisiveness. And so between that and my faith and prayer and my parents literally coming up to Connecticut during COVID, my dad has 2 kinds of cancer, was not supposed to be around me. Because the second I got the shot and got suspended, I got a terrible case of COVID. Of course, the irony of that. While I'm suspended and getting death threats, I was on the floor with COVID and
Wow.
was alone because I'm alone without my kids. My kids couldn't be around me.
Right.
And from that was a huge turning point, when I realized that they wanted this and they were celebrating. People were celebrating the troubles I was having and that I was sick. And I realized I'm allowing them to change me, and that's not on them. That's on me. And with the strength of my parents and God, I've been able to pull myself through it. But can I just end on this?
Please,
Like,
please.
I get concerned that people think me continuing to tell my story. It's like, oh, woe is me. No, I just want people to know that, like, despite what people might think from watching SportsCenter for all those years, and you see my smiling face, and okay, I get to talk to amazing people and athletes and make a lot of money. Great, yes. And there's a human aspect to all of us. And there are fears with all of us, and responsibilities and major risks when you do choose to stand up and speak out. Don't underestimate that every single person has got something that they're dealing with. So I'm doing it for everybody else too, and I want to bring people along with me. My dad, and this is in that NFL Films piece that's on my Twitter X profile.
I'll check it out.
My dad taught us this when we were little kids. We had to memorize part of the cadet prayer from West Point, and this is literally what made me file the lawsuit. Helped me to choose the harder right instead of the easier wrong, and to never be content with a half truth when the whole can be one. So Amazing. It was a pain in the ass to have to follow that as a kid and memorize it, and salute for our Saturday morning bedroom inspections, which is just one big fun competition. If your bed wasn't made right, drop and give me 10 push-ups. I was like Jack from a young age. But like the harder right, it was easier to stay silent. It's safer. It's cheaper. All of the things. Keep the career, keep the friends, keep the neighbors, keep the money. That's easier and safer. And there were times when my mother was like, Sage, just stop. Stop.
Right.
And then I realized, and then she realized too, the harder thing is the right thing usually. And I wasn't content with a half truth. The whole truth can be one for all of us. It just takes courage. And most importantly, knowing that you're not alone. I finally know I'm not alone. So shame on me if I don't try to share that with all these other people. Like, come with me, us. And it isn't about dividing. It's about trying to bring people together by saying things with kindness. I try. I'm not always perfect with that.
Right.
But like we know what the harder right is, whether it's speaking up and suing Disney. Are you kidding me? David versus Goliath. Or what if it's just putting the grocery cart back when you're done shopping instead of putting it up on the curb because you're more important than the poor kid who has to come get it. Do the right thing.
Makes sense.
Be kind. It's really not that hard.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, you've always seemed very kind to me. The fact that you've come on today and you've given us so much time and just getting to know you better. I know how kind you are in your heart. I need to start that with my 5 daughters. I need to start having them have Saturday bedroom inspection. I didn't know that you can do that. But
it's too late. Don't do it. You have 5 daughters.
I do. But I've also got 2 grandkids, so a couple of them are already out of the house. So
you survived. So why don't you text me any information, because at 18, 20, and 22, like, there might be water in this, and there might not. I'm not going to tell you what's in
We will talk further about that next time. Sage, thanks for making the time. The Sage Steele Show is on Bill Maher's podcast network. Go and check it out. Go and follow her everywhere.
YouTube, please. I didn't know about this whole podcast world. Please go to YouTube. I need help. Oh, my gosh.
Go there and follow Sage today. We'll put out the links as well. Sage, thanks a million. Anytime you want to come on, my show is your show. Anytime.
Thank you so much. God bless.
All right. We're back after this. Stay right here.